Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I can see that a lot of you have already joined today, and that's really good. This webinar is going to be about scholarships and planning your long-term finances at LiU, but also in Sweden in general. We also have a guest here today, so Karina is here. She is an international student recruitment coordinator, so a very long title, here at Linköping University. So she is our official expert today. And as I've already mentioned, we will be drawing your attention to funding and financing your studies at LiU, and also talk a little bit about scholarships. Before we get to that, though, it's important to note that the deadline for submitting all your supporting documents is coming up. It's on February 1st. And yeah, Karina, what happens if they don't upload the documents on time?
Yeah, if you upload anything after February 1st, then you will be considered a late applicant. And late applicants, they will only be assessed if the program is still open and if there are still available places. So for example, if you have applied to an engineering program, I know that all of those, they are already closed. So you have a sharp deadline on February 1st.
So it's very important to submit all your supporting documents before February 1st. That's always very important to know. And just for the few people that arrived a little bit later, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, you can write them there. And we have some staff behind the scenes that are working on answering those for you. So on to the next question. The webinar is about long-term funding, or funding on a long-term basis. What does this mean? Can you develop a little bit more?
Yes. When you think about financing your entire time in Sweden, it is usually in most cases 2 years. Don't just think about the first semester. Unfortunately, we do have some students who pay the tuition fee for the first semester. They come here and then they realize that they can't fund the second semester. So they have to leave. I mean, we think that is quite unfortunate, actually. So that's why we want you already know to have a long-term approach when you think about financing.
I understand. So yeah, it's very important to think within the 2 years or 1 year that your program is.
Yes. And if you don't get a scholarship, what do you do then? Because actually that is what is going to happen to most of you. I have so many questions from applicants who are thinking about getting a scholarship. And unfortunately, that will not happen to the majority of you. So then it goes back to you, how do you finance yourself? There are some students thinking, oh, I was working while I was a bachelor student. It worked out just fine for me. No problem at all. But unfortunately, the thing we get back from our professors is that they have noticed that there is a link between students who haven't thought through their financial situation. So they tend to work too much. And that affects negatively their study results. And that might mean that they cannot continue with their studies because the Agency of Migration have certain requirements. So also linking this to the present situation with Corona, maybe inflation coming up. And I know a lot of people all over the world have lost their jobs, their part-time jobs. Maybe your financial situation is a bit less positive than it was maybe some months ago. So reconsider if this is the right year for you to apply, or if you have a better financial situation if you apply next year. It could be worth considering, actually, because Sweden is a high-cost country.
Yeah, and especially if you're a non-EU student, then you have to consider the fees as well. So there's quite a lot to think about when moving to Sweden.
And when it comes to working experiences, what have you heard from your class, Rebecca?
So it depends a lot from student to student. I mean, obviously the university recommends that you don't work at all on the side. because your program is full-time, so that expects 40 hours a week, so a full working week or studying week in this case. So the university actively discourages any sort of side job, unless maybe a summer job that doesn't coincide with your studies. But obviously we know of students that have jobs on the side, and again, it's not illegal to work at the same time that you're studying, but it's just a matter of time management, but also in terms of expectations of how much money you think you can earn by working on the side. So for example, myself, I work a few hours a month, but obviously that would never be enough to cover rent and food and all of those other expenses. So it's really just an income, an extra income, on top of the one that I planned for before coming here. And I know of friends and colleagues in my program and other programs that do have side jobs as well. I don't know how many hours or how much they earn, but it's generally also like a side job so they can have some extra pocket money. So it's not really something to cover living expenses, because that's quite difficult to do if you're just working a few hours a month or even part-time. And so, yeah, I mean, a few options are babysitting or working at a cafe or restaurant, or yeah, I think a lot of students work for the food delivery companies, and generally that's a more flexible schedule. But I think it's important to not underestimate how much this takes from you, because obviously it's not just the hours of the actual job, it's also having to try to find that job, like going to job interviews and all those things. And it's quite difficult to get a job in Sweden if you don't speak Swedish, because I mean, most cafes, restaurants, shops, everything, they will probably require you to speak Swedish because most of the customers will be Swedish. So it's not just the job, it's not just finding the job, it's also actually getting the job. So there's a lot of difficulties on the way, and it does take a lot of time. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it is quite difficult. And I know a situation of someone that did work on the side, but then of course she did not manage to finish her program within the estimated 2 years because she was just not able to study full time at that point. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers having a job on the side. It's definitely not recommended. And if you come from outside the EU, then you really need to have that money and show the tax office that you have enough to support yourself. So I think that covers the job part, but then I'd mentioned the budget that you need to have for the tax office. Is that the same for both EU and non-EU citizens?
Yes, it is. You have to be able to financially support yourself. And for the Agency of Migration, you are required to have about $900 per month or 900 euro. What I can say about that is that the largest part generally goes to accommodation. Accommodation in a student dorm or an apartment is quite expensive in Sweden. So you should calculate around 350 to 400 US dollars per month for the rent. One way some students do in order to try to decrease the accommodation cost is to share a larger flat. It is not certain that the cost will diminish. It's also linked to the fact that there are some new recently built student dorms where the rent is quite expensive actually. So don't think that you can actually go below the money that the Agency of Migration requires you to have each month.
Okay, so moving on to scholarships, which is also quite a big topic for this webinar. Who can apply for a scholarship?
Yes, you have to be, of course, a fee-paying student in order to apply for a scholarship. And you have to have Linköping University as your first choice. You have to apply on time. And you also have to have all the documents in there by the deadline. So if you are a late applicant, you cannot at all apply for a scholarship.
That sounds quite strict. So what is the kind of student that will receive a scholarship?
Yeah, getting a scholarship from Linköping University, it is entirely based on your previous grades in your bachelor's. So those are the grades we are looking at. Your work experience does not count, for example, entirely your grades. And you can't just have average grades. You have to have really good grades, even if you compare yourself to other universities and maybe also to other countries.
Yeah, I've heard it's quite competitive. But even then, the scholarship doesn't cover everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The scholarship comes in the form of a tuition fee waiver, and it is usually 50% of the tuition fee. So you still have to cover maybe 50% of the tuition fee yourself, and also the cost of living.
Okay, so there's no scholarships for living expenses.
No, unfortunately not. So that's why we already now want you to think about how to finance your studies. And also that the scholarships, there's usually one, and I say only one per program. So that means that your chances are very, very slim.
Yeah, it's probably quite challenging as well.
Yes, you have to also, if you get the scholarship, there are certain requirements linked to the fact that you have a scholarship. So you also have to take at least 75% of the credits on the annual credits in order to have the scholarship for the second year, for example.
So just how challenging is it to get a scholarship then?
Well, you have to be have top grades if we compare you internationally, as there is only one per class. So maximum 5% of the applicants will receive a scholarship, as we take in several hundreds of students every year. And there are, let's say, maybe 25, 30 scholarships all in all for all fee-paying master students.
A question that I usually get often is as well, there's other scholarships, but those are not LiU scholarships. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have the Swedish Institute. I know that they have actually the best scholarships in Sweden. They cover both cost of living, tuition fee, and travels. So they are extremely well funded, but that is handled entirely by the Swedish Institute.
Yeah, exactly. So are there any scholarships for bachelor level studies?
No, unfortunately not. We, as some of you might already know, we only offer one bachelor program. So we don't have any scholarships on bachelor level at present.
And it's absolutely mandatory that LiU was your first choice to get a scholarship.
Yes, that's right. No other option is possible.
Okay. So when is the application deadline for scholarships?
Well, you have to wait for your notification of selection results. You will receive it, all of you, at the same time on April 7th. And on that day, you will also receive the link and info on how to apply for a scholarship. And you can apply between the 7th and the 10th of April. So it's a very short time. So be aware if you're interested.
Yeah. I will also at the end post some links where you can find more information on the scholarships as well. So if any of this is still a little bit unclear after the webinar, you can always check out the helpful links at the end. So when are the results for the scholarships announced? So the application is from the 7th to the 10th?
Yes, and the announcement will take place on the 25th of April.
Okay.
And you will find it on our website on the liu.se/scholarship page, the same from where you applied. It will be announced there. It will not be sent out, so you have to verify yourself whether you received a scholarship or not. And a few days after, I think it's the 27th, all the students, our fee-paying students, they will receive information about how to pay the tuition fee. And those who got a scholarship, then the tuition fee waiver will be deducted. So there's no invoice sent out, only information about how to pay. and the deadline for paying is June 1st.
Okay, June 1st. So how does it work after that as well? Because it might sound a little bit confusing.
Yes. After you paid the tuition fee, then we will notify the agency of migration that you've paid when we receive the payment. And then you can also apply for your residence permit. So the processes are more or less parallel. The sooner you pay the tuition fee, the sooner we can inform the agency of migration that you've paid, and you can go online and do the application. Unfortunately, we are not able to help you with the residence permit application, so you have to handle that yourself. And if you have any questions, you address them to the agency of migration.
Okay, and I think related to that, there's also something important to mention about the registration and their link to accommodation.
Yes, accommodation is difficult to find in all university towns in Sweden. So that's why I'm telling you now, if you haven't already registered with our accommodation companies, Heimstaden and Studentbostäder in Linköping and Studentbo in Norrköping, then I recommend you strongly to do it right away, because they are counting every day. The more queuing points you have, and you get 1 point per day, the better it is. They will release the available rooms mid-July, and then you can see how your position is. So do the process. It doesn't cost you anything, but you have to do this parallelly with the present application process in order to have a chance of having somewhere to stay upon your arrival. Either it will be 1st of August when the contracts start, or it will be 1st of September. That is most usual. But I could add to your earlier comment on accommodation, there are quite a lot of students who have to move around a bit when they arrive in order to find a long-term solution. What would you say about accommodation, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I personally had a bit of a different experience, but what Karina said about signing up for the queuing system, it really is very, very important, because in Sweden it works a little bit differently. I personally was not expecting it at all. But you sign up for these websites and it's cost free. You just sign up with your email and and then every day you collect 1 point. So it takes some time to gather up a lot of points. And most Swedish students do it already in high school. So when they get to university, they already have 1,000 points. And obviously then the rooms are assigned based on how many points you have. So obviously students that have 1,000 points are going to be the first ones to get the room that they want. So if you sign up for those housing queues right now, you're still going to have a better chance than other international students that sign up for housing in a couple of months, only when they get admitted, for example. So definitely sign up for that. And I would say, if you have the option of coming early, do so. But too early can also be a problem, because the housing companies, they only release the rooms in mid-July. And if you come too early, then they will say you're not exactly a student yet, so you cannot apply for accommodation just yet. And I would say don't be too picky about the rooms you choose. You can be sure that the rooms at these housing companies like Heimstaden and Studentbo and Studentbostäder, that they are legit rooms and they're companies, and you can trust them in terms of, like, if you get a room, then you can pay for the first month without any issues. But obviously, if you go on the Facebook groups and such, then you need to be a little bit more careful about ads that are too good to be true, especially. And never send your money to anyone without having seen the apartment and having the key and contract in your hand, because unfortunately there are a lot of scams especially for international students that don't really know how it works. And it can happen. I've seen it happen, unfortunately, and it's very hard to find these people and actually punish them for scamming students. So keep in mind to keep an eye out for that. And lastly, if you're on a plane to Sweden and you still don't have a room, I would say definitely don't despair, because there's always other options. We have a student association called Combo, which helps students find accommodation, and they have emergency accommodation during the autumn semester. Keep in mind, this is only for individual students. So if you have a family, then Combo cannot give you emergency accommodation. But also you can just stay in a hostel or an Airbnb, or even with a friend if they managed to get a room and you didn't. And then you can look for rooms that have their contracts starting on September 1st, because by that time, most students have already gotten their rooms and it's easier to get a room starting September 1st. And I have friends that did that and it was fine. I mean, it means you're spending a little bit more money in temporary housing, but you will eventually find a place to live in. And I think that's the most important thing. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Karina?
No, I think it was really good.
Yeah, I worked a little bit during the summer welcoming the new students. So I got a lot of these questions and students coming in like, oh, I don't have a place to stay. And then a few days later, they were like, oh, actually, I had this friend and, you know, we found this apartment and now we're sharing it. And yeah, it's definitely going to be stressful. So I would say prepare yourself for that as good as you can, but it's also a bit of luck, unfortunately. But eventually everyone ends up finding a place to stay. And if you end up in a room that you don't like as much, maybe the area is not the one that you wanted, you can always move, especially when you're with these housing companies. It's usually quite easy to switch rooms. So yeah, there's always an option you can always go up. All right, well, if there's nothing else to add, I think that is it for our little session here. Thank you for all of the questions and thank you for being here. I hope we answered most of your questions. And now on the screen, there are these links that I mentioned. So these are just useful links for accommodation, etc. The first one is an article about finances. So how, like, what are your requirements for the Swedish tax office and so on and so forth. The second one is an article about accommodation. So there you're going to find the links for our main housing companies, but also some tips about what you should start doing now. We have the link for the scholarships. So the instructions will be there again, and also the dates. We have our international student blog. So these are student ambassadors that have been studying at LiU for a few months or even a year or so, and they post just about their experiences. So you might be able to find some blogs about financing your studies as well. Then we have our Instagram, which is run by these same ambassadors. So if you still have any questions left, you can try and find the Instagram account. And if there is an international student or non-EU student on it at the moment, then you can ask questions about scholarships directly to them. And finally, we have our little podcast, which is called Fika with Us. And we have 2 episodes that focus specifically on the cost of living in Sweden and budgeting, or on how to stay on your student budget. So if you're interested in that, you can follow this link. The links are going to stay up until 3, and the questions will keep being answered until that time as well. And from me, that's everything. I thank Karina for being here today, and I thank all of you for being here today as well. I hope you take care, and yeah, goodbye. I'll see you soon, hopefully.